is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Welcome, everybody. Matt Connarton Unleashed. We are live and on the air. It is April 14th, 2016, a little bit after 11 p.m. in the Eastern Time Zone. That's right. No big fancy intro tonight. We are just diving right in. And here's why. That's sort of become the tradition on debate night. Because on debate night, when there's a debate, I try to catch as much of it as I possibly can before having to go on the air, because I do so love the debates and love discussing the debates. And tonight was I shouldn't say was. It might still be on, or it might be wrapping up on CNN, a Democratic debate, the first one in 5 weeks. Can you believe it? 5 weeks. I was feeling a bit deprived. But so typically what happens is, of course, because I try to catch as much of the debate as possible, I then have to rush to get here to the Uptown Auto Repair Studio, from whence we broadcast on the IPM Nation live station. So because of that, I don't have time to produce one of my wonderful intros where I say something snarky and then you hear the air horn, which means that an unleashing is imminent, and then you hear all of that. So you just get the bare bones sort of, bam, here's the intro music, and then here I am. Some of you may prefer it that way. I don't know. So another thing that's a bit different tonight is we have a new piece of equipment here at the Uptown Auto Repair Studio, because if you had listened to the show live on Monday night or Tuesday night, and this didn't happen with Wednesday's show, because Wednesday we pre-record technically, because on Wednesdays we do the television edition of the show in the afternoon, the weekly television edition of Unleashed, and then we use that audio for the radio show Wednesday night. But of course, we are on 5 nights a week on IPM Nation Live Station Channel 2. And then Tuesdays and Thursdays, we also have the honor and privilege of being carried on OMTimes, specifically OTR-FM, the premium channel on the OMTimes radio network. So hello to all of you. But if you listen to Monday night's show, Monday nights were strictly on IPM Nation Live 2, and I ended the show early. And if you listen to Tuesday night's show, Tuesday nights, of course, were on not only IPM Nation 2, but OTR-FM. Tuesday night, I got through the first segment, and then for the rest of the show, just played some pre-recorded audio. So that will not occur tonight. Tonight, things are back to normal, because basically what happened is we had a little bit of an issue with one of our computers here at the Uptown Auto Repair Studio. And so that has been resolved. Monday night, I thought it was a fluke, but once it became apparent that it was not a fluke, we had to invest in some new equipment. So I won't bore you with all the details of that, but I am confident that tonight's show will be back to our normal standard, because I am sitting here, I'm looking at a new Lenovo IdeaPad, it's called, that we're using in addition to what we had been using. So this will make it so that now that I have this here at the Uptown Auto Repair Studio, things won't be freezing up like they were, because that's what was happening. Everything was freezing up while I was trying to do a live show both Monday and Tuesday night. So it was time to invest in something new. So, and you know what? I probably shouldn't do this because they're not a sponsor. They're not giving us any money to do this, but I'm going to go and do it anyway because I just want to. And say that, I was very happy when I left Best Buy last night with my purchase of this new Lenovo IdeaPad that I'm using right now. So I was very, very happy. They have some great sales right now. So again, they're not a sponsor. They're not giving us any money, but I received great service there, and I was very happy with my purchase when I left. So, and as long as I remain happy with my purchase throughout the show, I will only have good things to say regarding them. So, shout out to Best Buy. In fact, I was on the phone earlier with Brian Browdy, who's the host of All Natural Bean, which is currently the #1 show on IPM Nation. You can hear that weekday mornings at 7 a.m. Eastern on IPM Nation 1. And then there's an 11 a.m. replay on IPM Nation 2 for the West Coast. But I said to Brian, because he was about to go out and buy another MacBook in addition to the one he's already using. And I said, well, let's go to Best Buy. Just get a Lenovo. They've got them on sale right now. So anywho, so tonight should go off without a hitch. So let's see. Programming notes. Had a very interesting television edition of the show this week, and that is up and available on our YouTube channel, the IPM Nation YouTube channel. My guest was Janet Del Fuco, and she's been the victim of some mortgage fraud and so forth here in New Hampshire, which is where we broadcast the show from. And I know we have listeners across North America. But New Hampshire is an interesting place because there seems to be a lot of fraud and corruption here, and there's really just not a lot of regulation. And maybe it probably makes me a bad libertarian to say this, but I think some things do need to be regulated somewhat within reason, like banking and mortgages and so forth, because otherwise. People just get really taken advantage of and don't have much recourse. So if you want to hear the full story and see the full story, again, that is up on the IPM Nation YouTube page. Janet has also been a guest on State of Corruption, another show that we carry on IPM Nation hosted by Mike Gill. Very, very interesting conversation. So you can check that out. I should mention, too, speaking of Mike Gill, we do have a new sponsor on Matt Connarton Unleashed and on IPM Nation, the Mortgage Specialists. You can go to themortgagespecialists.com if you need help with your mortgage. Buying a home is a very, very big deal, not to be taken lightly, and it's easy to feel overwhelmed and like with a lot of things. I mean, it's really, if you think about it, buying a home, I mean, that's it's unlikely for most of us that we'll ever make a larger purchase in our lives than that. So again, make sure you go to themortgagespecialist.com if you need help with that. And so very happy to have them on board with the show and with IPM Nation. And IPM Nation just continues to grow, as does OMTimes Radio. All the time I'm hearing new promos for new shows on OMTimes and OTR FM as well. So a lot of great stuff going on, a lot of positive things. And, of course, I should remind everybody, too, IPM Nation Live Station, powered by Ambit Energy. If you want to learn how to save on your energy bills, go to ipmnation.ambitrabbit.com. And I think where we'll start with the obvious tonight. Of course, tonight's debate. There's an article up on Politico, and it's funny, when I first logged on, to Politico about, what was it? About 20 minutes ago. It was the article was the 5 most interesting moments of the Democratic debate. And, of course, now it's been updated to the 7 most interesting moments of the Democratic debate so far. And it's probably wrapping up now. But I'll tell you one thing. I have to say I was not as impressed with Bernie as I have been in previous debates. I felt that in previous debates, Bernie consistently outclassed Hillary and really kind of got her with some good zingers. And there were a couple tonight, but for the most part, I think tonight Hillary did pretty well. I'd probably call it a draw based on what I saw. This is an important debate for Bernie tonight because, going into the New York primary, if he doesn't win in New York, God, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, he's the thing is, he's won a lot of debates and caucuses lately. Bernie's been on quite the winning streak. He's been on quite a roll, but it has not mattered much because Hillary still somehow manages to win more of the delegates. I think it was, what was it, Wisconsin? He won big in Wisconsin, I think, by 12 points, and they ended up going halves on the delegates somehow. It's either Wisconsin or Wyoming, one of the W states. But I think Bernie won both of those in the past week. And, it's interesting to see. I mean, obviously the establishment doesn't want him. But I didn't think Bernie really kind of did that great tonight from what I saw. Again, I'd call it about even. We'll get into, when we come back from the break in a couple minutes, we'll get into some of the details. But couple of particularly interesting moments to me. They got into this thing over the minimum wage, the fight for 15 as it's become known, and they were both being kind of disingenuous with it. Hillary claiming that she's always been for a $15 minimum wage, which Bernie said, well, that's kind of a shock since she really has pushed for $12. And she said, well, yes, but I want to get to 15 incrementally, but I want to leave it up to the states to decide what to do. They spent a lot of time on that. And the other thing was Bernie talking about Israel in terms of Palestine and negotiations and so forth. We'll get into that. That was very interesting because he's in kind of the same boat as Trump with that stuff. And on that specifically, and I'll explain what I mean by that when we'll come back. So more Unleashed coming up. We're live on IPM Nation 2 and OTR FM. Stay with me.
The Real Conscious Connection. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
The name is Bond. James Bond.
No, the name is Joe, The Joe Show. And we are returning back for our 9th season here on OMTimes Radio. So tune in every Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, on OMTimes.com/mobile. You can take us wherever you go. Yeah!
Time to read that inspiring book or that blog post you've been meaning to get to? In your busy world, how do you improve yourself and keep your life going? I'm Lisa Kay, and my Between Heaven and Earth radio show can transform your life just by listening. Be uplifted with inspiring topics, positive stories, and ideas that really work. Between Heaven and Earth radio is conscious living for your soul, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
The number one reason girls drop out of school in sub-Saharan Africa is lack of access to feminine hygiene products. The Pads for Schoolgirls Project, an outreach of Humanity Healing International, is changing this paradigm by setting up sewing programs at schools, teaching girls a vocational skill while producing the reusable pads that help keep them attending classes. The girls pay it forward by making and giving pad kits to other girls in need. To learn more, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Welcome back, everybody. Matt Connarton Unleashed. We are live from the Uptown Auto Repair Studio in glorious Manchester, New Hampshire. Coming to you on OTR FM tonight because it is a Thursday. And, of course, as we are 5 nights a week at 11 p.m. Eastern on the IPM Nation live station, Live 2. So, by the way, if you would like to opine on anything tonight, you can call or text the following number. You ready? 617-9174-IPM. That's IPM as in IPM Nation. 617-917-4476 if you prefer. Of course, you can also tweet me at Matt Connarton. You can post on the Matt Connarton Unleashed Facebook page anytime, really. And we have the fancy chat room, IPMNation.com/live too. You can use that anytime you so desire as well. So there are no shortage of ways to get in touch. I forget if I mentioned it. You can call or text at the number that I gave you, 617-917-4476. If you're too shy to call and you would rather text, there is that, because we live in an era where eventually there will come a time where human beings simply are no longer able to speak on a telephone, and they will only be able to text. I feel it is inevitable. There are people, of a certain demographic, a very young demographic, who you can tell they're just very awkward on the phone. I've heard people complain about this in terms of working environments. People at jobs where, in fact, I can say very specifically, Ryan, or Rhino as he's known in the Jinx, one of the bands I play in. I say play present tense because none of the bands I've been in ever really officially break up, even though the Jinx hasn't done anything in a while. But I remember a few years ago we were practicing. We had a show coming up, and Ryan was talking about how he sees that at his job. He's in sales. He works for a company. Actually, he's been at the same company for a really long time. He's done well there. But how he sees these kids that come to work there that are like right out of college, and they can't speak on the telephone. Like they literally cannot have a coherent conversation on the phone and speak with another human being on the other end. It's like baffling to them. It's interesting. Anyway. So, again, getting back to the debate, they've updated it again on Politico, one of my favorite sites. 9 most interesting moments of the Democratic debate. Now, I should say, I feel compelled to do this every now and again. I think I do this maybe every 5 or 6 weeks on average. For those who are relatively new to the show, and I know we've been picking up a lot of new listeners as our audience continues to grow, and I'm very grateful and appreciative for that. For anyone who's unclear as to where I am politically, I'm really an independent because I don't, at the end of the day, I really just don't believe in any of these people. And I support independence as much as possible. For example, here in New Hampshire, I've endorsed Mike Gill for governor, who, for a number of reasons, but for one thing, he's an independent. He's running for governor as an independent, so I support him. I also, I've endorsed Darrell W. Perry, who is running for the Libertarian nomination. And if he is the Libertarian nominee, I will vote for him in the general election. If not, if it winds up being Gary Johnson, because Governor Johnson is the former governor of New Mexico, and is the biggest name, so to speak. He's the big dog. On the Libertarian side in terms of candidates. He was the Libertarian nominee in 2012. Saw a recent poll, by the way, Gary Johnson at 11% nationally. Thought that was incredible. But that's great for an independent. But I'll probably end up voting for whoever the Libertarian nominee is. I try to vote against the two-party system as much as possible. I think the two-party system is terrible for America, and continues to be very damaging. And I want to see more independents get elected. So I do what I do what I can to kind of help that along. So for anyone who's new to the show, who's wondering, because I know it's confusing to people in the landscape of political talk, generally. Well, in terms of terrestrial radio, conservative talk radio really kind of dominates the airwaves. But if someone's not a conservative, they're probably a liberal. There are liberal talk shows as well. But then there's, I think, in the one sense, there's nothing unique about what I do in the terms of it's another political talk show. There's a million of them. But I do feel I'm doing something relatively unique in that there's really not a lot of independent political talk shows where you'll have someone who basically finds things to agree with in both liberalism and conservatism, and things to be completely repulsed by in both liberalism and conservatism. I define myself as a non-ideological practical pragmatist. I'm not interested in isms. I'm not interested in ideology. I'm interested in solutions that work. And I'm also interested in freedom and people being able to make their own choices, which is why I'm probably closer to being a libertarian than anything. But I'm even hesitant to call myself a libertarian. Occasionally, I might describe myself as libertarian leaning or sort of a quasi-libertarian, but I really don't want to join an ism because with any ism, and I'm getting a little bit sidetracked from where I was going to go, but this is something I need to say. And I know my libertarian friends, of which I have many, and many broadcast colleagues in that vein, many hosts on IPM Nation who are very libertarian, don't necessarily want to hear this, but I'm finding that I've come to the conclusion recently that, for a few reasons, that one of the issues that I have with the other two major political ideologies, conservatism and liberalism, and with other ideologies as well, like political correctness I regard as an ideology. I'll throw that in too. And of course, there's religious ideology. One of the problems that I have with all of these ideologies, I see the same thing with libertarianism as an ideology, and it's this. Within any ideology, there are forces within it. It is the nature of ideology. There are forces within it that want to push it to its furthest possible extreme and begin to work to exclude anyone who doesn't go along with that. And I'll tell you, and as examples, so with Republicans now, as you've seen the polarization of the two parties over the years, the Republican Party has gotten more and more far right, and the Democrats have gotten more and more far left. So on the Republican side, if you're a Republican, but you try to be sort of a moderate centrist Republican, if you step out of line on even one issue, like maybe you're a Republican who happens to believe in climate change, or maybe you're a Republican who happens to be pro-choice, you step out of line on anything, you're called a rhino, a Republican in name only, or you're called a liberal. You know, Jeb Bush, because he actually supported immigration reform, called a liberal, or called a rhino. Heard it all the time on conservative talk radio. And you see a similar thing on the Democratic side. You know, you see Hillary Clinton desperately, during these debates, desperately trying to appear to be almost as to the left as Bernie, because that's what you've got to do to win the Democratic nomination. You know, she can't be the centrist that her husband was, because in this day and age, you can't get away with it. You have to be far left. And I've come to the realization recently that libertarianism isn't much different in that regard, because, and again, but why would it be any different? It's an ideology, just like the other ideologies, because I've noticed that, now this is a hyper simplification, but in listening to a lot of this libertarian programming, much of which we carry on IPM Nation, if you take libertarians and divide them into two camps, anarchists and minarchists, anarchists who basically want no laws about anything ever, right? They just want it to be a free-for-all. They don't even want to have police. I've heard Ian say it a million times on Free Talk Live. If you want police protection, hire your own private security. Everyone can just hire their own private security, which I think is a crazy idea. But so you've got the anarchists who are basically anything goes. They don't want any laws about anything. And then you've got the minarchists, who I think I would qualify as a minarchist, who believe in having a very small government, a minimal government, which I agree with. I would like to have a very small, minimal federal government and have it do very few things, because it doesn't do very many things very well. But there is an attitude among the anarchists that the minarchists aren't true libertarians, that they're just their status, who call themselves libertarians. So it's the same thing that you see with conservatism and liberalism. If you don't take the absolute extreme posture on everything, then you're not really one of us. It's the same thing. These anarchist libertarians, they talk about minarchists like, no, they're not. They call themselves libertarians, but they're not true libertarians. If they were true libertarians, they wouldn't want any government at all. And by the way, the problem with anarchy is government is, in my view, unavoidable. And here's what I mean. If you could wave an anarchist magic wand tomorrow and all of a sudden there was no government at all, well, for one thing, it would be anarchy. I mean, I'm sorry, but it would be. And anarchists, of course, will tell you, well, the anarchy doesn't really mean what people think it means and that the meaning of the word has been twisted. No, I know what anarchy really means, and it does mean what people think it means. Okay. So, yes, there would be anarchy. But the reason government isn't avoidable is because people don't like anarchy very much. And people have a natural tendency to want to organize and create hierarchies and whatnot. So some government, some form of government, some governmental structure would begin to take hold as people go, hey, wait a minute, this anarchy thing is, well, it's anarchy. So we have to figure out some sort of system here, some sort of hierarchy. Hey, Bill, maybe we'll put you in charge of that. And hey, Judy, maybe we'll put you in charge of this. And, well, maybe we should elect people to these positions instead of just one person decides who's in charge and whatnot. Some level of government is unavoidable, no matter how much you might hate government. So I don't want to really label myself as a libertarian either. I don't want to label myself as anything. You know what I think it is? Some people just aren't joiners. I'm not a joiner. I don't want to join an ism. I don't want to join a club. It's just not for me. More Unleashed. Debate stuff when we get back, I promise. Don't go away.
The Real Conscious Connection. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
Circle of Hearts Radio is a sanctuary on the airwaves. Join me, Grandmother Elia, in the circle on Sunday, 2 p.m. Eastern as I share information to both enlighten and nourish your soul.
Do you want to be a better communicator? Do you want to better connect with the important people in your life? Do you want to enrich your relationships? If so, join me, Matthew Cooper, on the Positive Control System Show every Wednesday evening at 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time on OMTimes Radio. I'll meet you there.
Have you ever wondered how to change your love paradigm? The secret key is finding a love partnership, not just a regular connection. How do you find these? Through conscious relationships. Ascending Hearts Dating is a dating site for people like you that believes in second chances and a different type of spiritual connection. Try Ascending Hearts for free today at ascendinghearts.com and change your love paradigm. Ascending Hearts, the premier dating community for the spiritually awake.
That gets the blood pumping a little bit, doesn't it? Welcome back, Matt Connarton Unleashed. We're live on OTR FM, as we are every Tuesday and Thursday night, and 5 nights a week on the IPM Nation live station, Channel 2. Sponsored, of course, powered by, I should say, Ambit Energy. To save more on your energy bills, go to ipmnation.ambitrabbit.com. Of course, we have our newest sponsor, the Mortgage Specialists. You can go to themortgagespecialists.com. You don't have to go it alone when buying a home. Yeah, it sort of rhymes. Sort of. And let's see. And, of course, we do broadcast every night from the Uptown Auto Repair studio in Manchester, New Hampshire. And very proud and honored to do that. And if you missed it, We are thus far having a technically glitch-free show tonight because we have a new piece of equipment here at the Uptown Auto Repair Studio. I've got this little Lenovo IdeaPad. Lenovo, for those who don't know, if that name is unfamiliar, they bought, several years ago, they bought IBM. Of course, everyone remembers, well, I shouldn't say everyone remembers IBM. I know there's a lot of younger folks who listen to my show who might be like, IBM? Yes, IBM. Not IPM, IBM. And Lenovo bought IBM, but I used to have an IBM it was called an IBM ThinkPad. And I must tell you, the IBM ThinkPad, it was the first computer I know this is fascinating. We'll move on in a minute. It was the first computer I ever used, the first laptop I ever used for any kind of radio broadcasting. Not live stuff, but for recording shows. And I loved it. It eventually crashed, and I was crushed because that computer was so great, so perfect for working with audio. It was so quiet. It made no internal noise. See, this was like back in 2007, where I was having a hard time finding a computer that didn't make some sort of internal noise that would end up showing up in the audio. I'd be trying to interview a band or something before I ever interviewed politicians and or talked about politics on the air. And, but that IBM ThinkPad was wonderful. Eventually it crashed. But this, it's almost like I'm time traveling here because this Lenovo IdeaPad, not coincidentally, because, again, they bought IBM, it looks and works very much like the old IBM ThinkPad I had. So this is wonderful. And again, if you missed it at the top of the show, so Monday and Tuesday night we had some problems because one of the computers that we broadcast with, well, I think I've had this since 2007, so things were starting to kind of freeze up a little bit. So it was time to upgrade, get something new. So that's why things are back to running smooth as they should. Because that's what we require here at IPM Nation. Smoothness. Or something. Or if I were a rapper, I might say smoothness. I think they say smooth. Yo, got to keep it smooth. It's not racist, is it? No, because I'm talking about, because white people rap too, right? See, some social justice warrior probably is going, I just said something racist. I did not, because white people rap too. I'm pretty sure I've heard Vanilla Ice say smooth. I think that's where I got that, okay? Anyway, let's move on, shall we? Okay, this is from Politico. 9 most interesting moments of the debate. And I will give you my expert opinion and analysis on each of these as we examine them. And by expert, I mean, I'm just going to tell you what I think. Okay, number 1. Sanders tries to make nice, unqualified comments. Clinton throws it in his face. This was interesting. Now, Sanders, criticized earlier this week for questioning whether Clinton was qualified to be president, sounded like he wanted to squash the dispute by saying she had both the ability and intelligence to be a competent president. But then he questioned her judgment for voting to authorize the war in Iraq, which Sanders called the worst foreign policy blunder in the history of this country. Well, I would have to agree. Let's see. He didn't stop there, questioning her judgment on trade, super PACs, and Wall Street. Clinton didn't let any of that fly. She said New Yorkers found her judgment sound when they elected her as senator twice, and that this was a good, I have to give her credit. I don't like her. Of these two, I like Bernie Sanders. I actually like Bernie Sanders very much, which, by the way, and again, for those of you new to the show, I should explain something. This is another thing very unique about me. I have figured out something that I don't think almost anyone else realizes. It is possible to like someone without necessarily supporting them, okay? So when I tell you I like Bernie Sanders, doesn't mean I support Bernie Sanders or want Bernie Sanders to be president. Frankly, I do not. As I described myself earlier, as a minarchist, I couldn't possibly support Bernie Sanders. He is a democratic socialist. He believes in big government. He wants big government to regulate everything. I do not. So I do not support him. But I do like the guy. He does say some things that I agree with. And I like his whole presentation, and I think he's interesting, and I think he's kind of cool, and I think he's even got kind of a weird charisma about him. And I like watching him really stick it to Hillary, because I don't like Hillary at all. Now, by the way, do I think Hillary is qualified to be president on paper? Yes, absolutely. She was a first lady. She was a senator. She was Secretary of State. Of course she's qualified. But I think Bernie, see, here's what I think Bernie is really saying. But he won't say. But I will say, because I've been saying this about Hillary forever. Hillary Clinton on foreign policy is essentially a neoconservative. She would be completely comfortable, I believe, would have been completely comfortable serving on the foreign policy team of George W. Bush. She believes in regime change and nation building and all of this garbage. She believes in supporting the military-industrial complex. And that's what I think Bernie is really saying. Look, you're just going to get more of the same with this. You're going to get more of this perpetual war, a phrase that Ron Paul used to use quite a bit when he was running. And I think I've heard his son use it too. So I think that's what he's really saying. But I do have to give her credit. This was a good line. When Sanders, is sticking it to her on the whole issue of judgment in terms of the invasion of Iraq, in terms of deposing Gaddafi in Libya. Also disastrous for kind of similar reasons, because it has a destabilizing effect. Sometimes you're better off with the devil you know, obviously, when it comes to these dictators. But this was her response, and I thought this was pretty solid. Again, I don't agree with her because I don't like her, but she said, quote, "President Obama trusted me enough to be Secretary of State of the United States," unquote. Then she went after him, pointing to the New York Daily News editorial page where he stumbled through multiple foreign policy questions, which I knew she was going to do. She said, quote, "I think you need to have the judgment on day one to be president and commander-in-chief," unquote. I'll say this for her, too. I don't want to get too carried away with complimenting her because I don't like her, but I will say this is something I will say about Hillary Clinton in terms of what I think she would be like in terms of commander-in-chief. Now, again, I don't think she'd be a good commander-in-chief because she is, again, by my judgment, a neoconservative. But I don't think she'd be taken lightly by the rest of the world. And I know some of you are going to disagree with me on this, but one thing I would not say about Hillary Clinton, I don't think she comes across as weak. And I think that where, Obama, you get the sense, doesn't really inspire a lot of fear. Well, except maybe in terms of the people who are in places like Afghanistan who know that the current commander-in-chief of the United States might, at a moment's notice, decide to murder their families with these drone strikes. But other than that, I don't think Obama inspires a lot of fear. And we always see how Putin clearly doesn't take Obama very seriously and whatnot. I don't think Hillary would have that problem. I think she comes across as very tough and very determined. Now, again, those aren't necessarily great things if you don't agree with her central policy or her worldview or her agenda and whatnot. And I certainly don't trust her. Hell, most Democratic voters don't trust her. Her negatives are very high among Democrats, even though she's the presumptive nominee. But I would never describe her as weak. And I think that she would bring a certain toughness to the office that Obama doesn't. Okay. Number two, wow, we're already running up against another break, but quickly, number two, Clinton and Sanders argue over who's tougher on Wall Street. Nothing new there. This comes up in every debate. Sanders hits Clinton very effectively, in my view. But in terms of, she goes and gives these big speeches where she's paid tremendous amounts of money in front of, for example, Goldman Sachs. And, what are they getting in return for that? And he's pointing out, there's a couple of parallels he does have, oddly enough, Bernie Sanders with Trump, and this is one of them. Where he's able to really kind of point out that, although for different reasons than Trump, that the system really is corrupt, that we basically have it's government for hire. And that's how it works. And anyone who doesn't believe that, I think, is naive too. Trump can point that out because he's directly participated. He can say, look, as a business, Trump uses it very smartly to say, whenever he's put on the defensive about having given campaign donations to all these Democrats over the years, Trump says, well, look, I had to. It was business. Cost of doing business. If I need something from someone who happens to be a Democrat, I'm going to give them a lot of money to help get them elected or help keep them in office. So he's able to, by that negative example, he's able to not only defend himself, but frankly point out the truth. That really is how our system works. Bernie is also able to do that, again, for different reasons. He's one of the, as he mentioned tonight, one of the poorest members of the United States Senate. You've got a Congress full of millionaires. He ain't one of them. All right, we'll come back in a couple minutes. We'll try to get through the rest of this list. We're live on Unleashed. Don't go away. It's one more segment to go.
The Real Conscious Connection. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
Hi, this is Angela Levesque, host of Entanglement Radio. Join me Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern for inspiring conversations with visionaries in spiritual science and conscious healing. Entanglement Radio, Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern. Transcendent talk for the conscious mind.
OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
IPMNation.com.
Welcome back, everybody. Matt Connarton Unleashed. We're live as we cruise into our final segment tonight here on IPM Nation 2 and OTR FM. Don't forget, if you want to check out this week's television edition of Unleashed, you can. It is up and available on demand on the IPM Nation YouTube channel. If you just click the YouTube link in the upper left of your screen, of your browser on IPMNation.com, it'll take you there. Let's see. I want to make sure. I want to try to get through the rest of this anyway in this final segment tonight. Of course, we've been looking at this article on Politico, the 9 most important moments of tonight's Democratic debate. I do so love the debates. I don't know if you could tell. Although they're not as much fun as the Republican ones, because the Republican ones you have Trump. But I don't know, are there even any more Republican debates scheduled? I know at one point there was one. I think Fox was going to do another one. And then Trump said he wasn't going to be there because he had a policy speech or something to give. And then, Cruz and Kasich said, well, I guess we won't do it either, which was foolish in my opinion. They should have gone ahead and done the debate, just the two of them. And I have reasons why I think that, but we won't get into all that right now. But I don't know if there are any more Republican debates scheduled. Let's see. But this was an important debate tonight for the Democrats because the New York primary is next week. And unfortunately, because I do prefer Bernie of the two, unfortunately, I think Hillary is probably going to win the New York primary. Last poll I saw had her well ahead. So, but I mean, again, what's it matter? She's going to get the delegates anyway. That's, it's rigged. Okay, let's see. Number 3, crowd roars when Clinton transcripts come up. This was an interesting moment. Again, there wasn't anything new here. This has come up in at least the last 2 debates, but this kind of picks up on what was number 2 when Sanders was again hitting her. Actually, let's go back to number 2 because there's something in here that there was an interesting quip from Sanders. So I'll read this whole thing. So number 2 was Clinton and Sanders argue over who's tougher on Wall Street. When asked to bring up an example of how Clinton has been swayed by donations from Wall Street, Sanders quickly pivoted to well-worn criticism of her paid speeches for Goldman Sachs. Quote, Secretary Clinton was busy giving speeches to Goldman Sachs for $225,000 a speech, unquote. Sanders said before digressing to his calls for breaking up the biggest banks in the country. Quote, the proper response, in my view, is we should break them up, and that's what my legislation does, unquote. Weak sauce, said Clinton, quote, he cannot come up with any example because there is no example. I stood up against the behaviors of the banks when I was a senator. I called them out on their mortgage behavior, unquote. Sanders then got sarcastic, as he's been known to do. He said, quote, they must have been crushed by this, unquote. He quipped before once again bringing up the speeches. Quote, they must have been very, very upset by what you did, unquote. And then that leads to number 3. Crowd roars when Clinton transcripts come up. And by the way, the crowd roared quite a bit tonight. It was a New York crowd. This was a raucous crowd. I said on Facebook, I said, I think by the end of this, someone's taking a steel chair to the head. Didn't happen, but. Although then again, I did miss the end of the debate because I had to get on the air. So who knows? Maybe I'll get to number 9 on this list and it'll be, Hillary takes a steel chair to the head. Let's see, number 3. Okay, so it says here, but Sanders was on to something. One of the loudest roars from the audience came when Clinton was asked by the moderators why she has not released the transcripts of her paid speeches to major financial institutions. She sidestepped, said, quote, there isn't an issue, unquote. She then pivoted to argue that Sanders and Donald Trump should release their tax returns. Quote, there is a long-standing expectation that everybody running release their tax returns. I think Senator Sanders, I think Senator Sanders and Donald Trump should do the same, unquote. Sanders said he would release some of his tax returns. He said that he would start with his 2014 tax returns. Let's see, number 5. This went on for a while. Sanders corners Clinton on minimum wage. When Clinton was asked if, as president, she would sign a $15 federal minimum wage bill that reached her desk, by a democratically controlled Congress, obviously, for this to happen, she said, quote, well, of course I would. And she then said, quote, I have supported the fight for 15, unquote. She said, as Sanders stood next to her, shaking his head in disbelief. This got interesting. Quote, again, this is Clinton talking, quote, I'm proud to have most of the endorsements of the unions that have led the fight for 15. I was proud to stand on the stage with Governor Cuomo, with SEIU, with others who have been leading the battle, and I will work as hard as I can to raise the minimum wage. I always have. I supported that when I was in the Senate, unquote. And by the way, she's like yelling as she's saying this. Not yelling in anger necessarily, but very passionately, very animated. That's when Sanders looked to pounce. Sanders said, quote, I am sure a lot of people were surprised to learn that you supported raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, unquote. Sanders and Clinton shouted over each other, leading Clinton. Yeah, this got very contentious. Leading Clinton to specify that, quote, we've got to be smart about it. All right. I'll read the rest of what she said. We've got to be smart about it, unquote, laying out a stepped approach that starts by lifting the minimum wage first to $12, then to $15. And then Sanders said, quote, there's a difference. And by the way, what has happened is history has outpaced Secretary Clinton because all over this country, people are standing up and saying $12 is not good enough. We need $15 an hour, unquote. This whole exchange went on for a long time, and they both kind of kept repeating themselves. But they were both being a bit disingenuous about her position. See, what she really has said, she tried to make it sound like she's always been supportive of a $15 minimum wage, and she's always been part of the fight for 15. The truth is, and Bernie was right to call her on this, is that she really, what she has advocated for is a stepped approach where we increase the minimum wage and potentially eventually get to, I think, $12, saying that to jump directly to $15 would be a bit reckless and irresponsible. So being a bit more conservative on that. And she's right, by the way. I don't think we should be... in places where they've done this, it's been disastrous economically. Businesses have closed because they couldn't afford to pay people $15 an hour. That's a fact. Okay, so just so you all know where I stand on this. So she's trying to spin it, though, to make it sound like she's really saying two things at once. The more I think about it, the more disingenuous she really was. Because on one hand, she's saying, well, if she's president and a bill lands on her desk to just go straight to 15, she'd sign it. But then her argument consistently has been that we can't do that. We can't go straight to 15. So she is being duplicitous here. But the thing is, though, she then explained, because Bernie had her cornered on this. So she did then clarify that she's for actually going to 12, and then hopefully we can get to 15. But even with that, she seemed to be saying that she would like the mandate to be 12, and then they would encourage individual states to go to 15. That's where it got a little murky. Because Bernie had her cornered. But then the thing where Bernie was being a little disingenuous was he just kept pushing by saying, well, you know, even after she had clarified, well, how can you say you're for 15 when you're really not? This kind of went on for a while, and it was kind of a ridiculous debate within the debate. But let's see, we're almost out of time, but number 5, Clinton apologizes for 1994 crime bill. That got complicated, and there's a lot to unpack there, which we don't have time to get to here. So we'll keep moving. Maybe tomorrow night on the show, we'll get into that a little bit more. Number 6, Sanders rolls out a planned fracking attack. That's another one that gets very complicated. Number 7 was particularly, and this is no less complicated, but this was very interesting to me. So Sanders says Netanyahu isn't right all the time. During an exchange over the conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians, the two candidates took different approaches. Sanders focused on the Palestinians and Clinton's focused on the Israelis. Sanders said, quote, We are going to have to treat the Palestinian people with respect and dignity, unquote. Clinton shot back that she had been involved in high-level, this was a good moment for her, actually, that she had been involved in high-level peace talks with both groups for years. She added that the Israelis, quote, do not believe that there should be a constant incitement by Hamas, aided and abetted against Israel, unquote. Sanders, though, said Clinton had a pattern of not focusing enough on the Palestinians. Okay, let me just kind of sum this up a little bit because we're running out of time. Well, here's the key quote, though, that Sanders said, quote, there comes a time when we have to say that Netanyahu is not right all the time, unquote. Bernie can get away with saying something like that because Bernie is Jewish. Here's the truth. In the past, for as long as I can remember, when discussing Israel, if you're not 100% with Israel 100% of the time, if you criticize them at all, or you criticize Netanyahu at all, you are labeled an anti-Semite. And this is another parallel that Trump has with Bernie, which is kind of weird, but they both have taken the position that you have to have a true negotiation with the Israelis and the Palestinians and not just automatically take Israel's side 100%. Bernie can get away with saying that because he's Jewish. You can't label Bernie an anti-Semite. He's Jewish. So he, now Trump, of course, says this and they say all kinds of terrible things about him. Meanwhile, Obama has a very strained relationship with Israel and Netanyahu. So they accuse him of being an anti-Semite, and they say all these terrible things about him. But this was a very interesting exchange. This is complicated, and I'd like to talk more about that. But we are out of time tonight, so we'll see what we get to tomorrow night on the show. Of course, our Friday night show you can hear exclusively on IPM Nation Live Station Channel 2. So for all of us who joined me tonight, both on IPM Nation and OTR FM, thank you so much. We'll be back tomorrow night